I shrunk. Nah, I'm playing. Let me get regular. Bam, bam. I think I'm good. Let me just touch it a little bit. Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Malaga young pagdating sa my chess, ladies and gentlemen. I think I said that correctly. Feel free to correct me if I said it wrong. I appreciate everybody stopping by very much. So, for all my people in the Philippines, I would say Mabuhay, Kamusta na, Masaya Kong Makiti Kang Muli, Mabuting Pagbadi, Almasao Tayo, Ingat Lagi. Appreciate you guys very much. For anybody who is coming from, Varuzhan Akobian is originally from Armenia. So if I have anybody that is coming from Armenia, I will say Vogjuven, Nc3 Be6, and Merci. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Yes. So I have Wesley So versus Varuzhan Akobian, and this is taken from Wijk Aan Zee in 2010. And it's a little bit rough, but this is the actual picture of them actually playing the game that I'm about to show you. So I was able, you get lucky, like when you go to like something that's like 10, 12, 15, 20, 30 years old, whatever. It's always fortunate when you have the ability to get the actual, the actual picture of them playing that exact game. So I lucked out. So if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. So we got D4, D5, C4, E6, knight to F3. We got C5. And we have pawn takes D5, pawn takes D5. We have knight to C3. So we have the Tarrasch defense. And as you guys can see, like it started off kind of like as a Queen's Gambit type situation. So you could have had like, knight to F6 and some Catalans, or you could have semi-Slavs, or, all different kinds of bishop B4 situations going on. But we do see the Tarrasch. It's not a rare line. It's not like the utmost played move. It's about 4 or 5 on the list. So it's definitely, if you want to kind of get off the main path, pop over into the Tarrasch territory. So like I said, we do see knight to C3. Then we see knight to C6. We have G3. Knight coming to F6. We see bishop to D2. So as you can kind of see, we do a little bit of kind of like a little Catalan in there with C5, which is a little different. Bam, C5. And so we do see bishop to E7. We see castles, and then we see castles, and then we see bishop to G5. And this is kind of a critical point in the game because now you kind of have to do something with this pawn because if you don't, you are going to be taking here and then taking here, and then this pawn is going to be an issue, especially after something like knight to E5. It's not going to be where you want to be. With the capture of this pawn here. Because, you're going to have to try to take back with the bishop, and then you're going to be kind of messed up. All kinds of nastiness. So we do see C4 by Akobian. So he's recognizing that it's an issue, and he doesn't want to see any tactics roll up. So we do see knight to E5. Knight to E5 is pretty obvious what White is trying to do. White is wanting the knight to take here so that they can take back with the pawn and displace this knight. And then you have a nice juicy pawn to grab. But black isn't doing that. They're just defending their pawn. So they say bishop to E6. We see B3. This is a very common way to try to break down a structure. This is a very offensive pawn in your position, so you want to kind of get rid of it. If you can ever trade here and then the pawn will trade here, you have the ability to have a completely passed D pawn. So as you guys know, D pawns can be very dynamic. So queen to A5 is trying to shut that down. We do have an attack on this undefended knight over here. So we see queen to D2, and then we see bishop to B4. And it's getting kind of hot over here, on this particular square. But, White has a plan. So we see knight takes C6, and you have to go pawn takes C6. You can't throw a little in-betweener in there. And then we do see bishop takes F6, and then we see pawn takes F6. And we actually don't have an in-betweener here either. It might kind of seem like, hey, this queen is now undefended. So let's go ahead and capture here. But if you capture here, you're going to be looking at queen to G5. And this king is sad. This king on this square right here. Bam. Sad. So we don't want that. So, like I said, we see pawn takes F6. And then now we do defend that knight with knight F to C1, or rook F to C1, sorry. Rook A comes to D8. It's never a bad idea to put the queen opposite to put the rook opposite the queen. It's always a good plan. So we got pawn takes c4, pawn takes c4, and then we have e3. Just trying to keep everything solid. You know, as you can see, you know, black kind of has, you know, a little bit of issues with their structure. So, you know, everything's not looking the greatest ever. And so we see f5, which is the novelty of the game. And I think, I mean, there's a pretty good reason why it's a novelty, because it just drops this pawn here on c6. Pretty much nothing was done to try to defend that pawn. So the pawn is gone. So it's pretty much just, you know, Wesley So being happy that he got himself a pawn, which I would be happy too. So we see f4, preparing to give away another pawn, in which, you know, it's very possible to go ahead and go, you know, pawn takes f4 and just be, you know, 2 entire pawns up. But we don't see that in the game. We actually see a3, you know, placing a very real attack on this bishop, you know, asking the bishop what does it want to do. So we do throw in a little in between, Zwischenzug move, pawn takes e3. We see queen takes e3. You know, and that conveniently steps you outside of that pin. We see bishop takes c3, rook takes c3, and then we see rook to d6. You know, this bishop is a little bit loose. You know, it's not, it definitely has squares to go to. Probably the best squares are actually going to go to f3 or back to g2. For some reason, those are better than bishop to e4, which is what we saw in the game. And then we do see rook f to d8. We see d5. And we see bishop takes d5, and then we have queen to g5 with check. And so what we're doing with this is we're checking the king, but then we are also pinning this bishop to this queen, because as you guys can see, this queen is undefended over there on a5. So we do see king over to f8. We see rook to e3. We see h6. Queen comes to f5, just maintaining that pin. And then we see rook over to e6. We see rook a to e1. You know, it does kind of look like it's deserting, you know, this pawn, but, you know, you don't really have the ability to, you know, take immediately, because of course you have this rook right here, but, you know, this bishop is going to be kind of lonely if you leave it. So we do see c3, and c3 is pretty nifty because it is disconnecting the connection between this rook and the pawn. So now taking the pawn is actually, you know, somewhat possible. We see queen up to h7. We see c2. So as you guys can see, this pawn is getting dangerously close to the touchdown. Like, it just literally just needs one move and we're good to go. So we do see bishop takes d5. And we have actually reached a point in the game that if you do want to stop the video and see what black plays in this position, go ahead and do so. All right, cool. So I think that you guys can see that X-raying through this rook is the other rook, and this queen is actually attacking that rook. So if you guessed the queen sacrifice, you would be correct. Queen takes e1 with check. And then we see rook takes e1, rook takes e1 with check, and then we see king up to g2. And then we have to take the offensive bishop because, you know, we were looking at checkmate here on f7. You know, it's even still a weak point, 31 moves into the game. So we do see queen taking c2. We see rook up to e6, and then we see queen to b3. And it is actually in this position that the players do agree to a draw. And it's basically because even though you're a pawn up as white, you have really no way to make progress because what you need to focus on as black is to make sure that you keep your rooks together. And your rooks will always be able to shield your king from any checks. You know, you probably will go ahead and back it up to d8. And as you can see, there's not really a good way for this queen to really penetrate. You know, you're always going to be able to, you know, move this rook over here and just make sure that you keep your, you know, keep your rooks connected. And that's one of the things about it. You know, I always talk about like when you guys are down, you know, a queen to maybe some other material, you know, you always want to make sure that, you know, your pieces are as coordinated as possible because that's going to be the best chance you have at trying to survive against the queen. There are definitely some situations where you might have 3 pieces against the queen and you have legitimate compensation, you know, for whatever situation that you're in. You know, those 3 pieces can actually, you know, compete against the queen. So just like I said, make sure that you're thinking about bringing your pieces together and trying to make sure that they're coordinated so that, you know, you don't lose a piece to a tactic or anything like that, and you can shield your king from checks. But that is that game. I think it was pretty interesting. I mean, I kind of thought, I felt like I saw the queen taking on e1, but I wasn't sure if that was the move. And then I saw it. I was like, yeah, that just makes a lot of sense to just kind of sacrifice that queen. You know, as you guys know, 2 rooks can compete against a queen as long as they're coordinated together. And so sometimes you can win, but you never know. But for all of my people in the Philippines, let me get these good mornings. So maanyong buntag, mayad na agahan, naibag na biga, masantos ya kabason, marhe na aga, buenos dias, maanyong aga, I'm spacing. I think it's Mapia na Uma. Yeah, Kapi and Kapu no Dios, Mayapa Abak, Mayad na Aga, Mapia Agay, Mapia Kapa Pizza, My Big Abukla, Marja na Buntag, Marja my not. Maupe na Aga, Kasan Yangan Si Elobi, Salam, Assalamu Alaikum, Merci. Man, I spaced right there though earlier on. But at least I was able to get through them though. That's the important thing. But I appreciate you guys very much. And I'll say Pa'alam to my people in the Philippines. Mamaya, a king Kaibigan, or a king Makaibigan. And I will see you guys next time. All right.